Hi, I'm Camilla.
And I'm Sam.
And we're from the Coto School Finder team. Today, we're going to talk about all the frequently asked questions that people like you often ask us about studying in Japan. We'll explain about when you need to apply, how much it will cost you, and some other key details that you need to know. So with that said, let's get started. Okay, first question here, Sam. When is the deadline for school applications, and how soon should I start the application process?
Yeah, great question. So the application process typically takes 6 months before your start date. So if you'd like to come and start studying in July, you would apply by the middle to the end of February. And there are typically 4 application deadlines per year. So you can't start whenever you want. And the application deadlines would be mid to end of August, mid to end of October, mid to end of February, or mid to end of May. And the start dates for those would be January, April, July, and October. So you can start as a student in January, April, July, or October, and you would need to submit your documents 6 months before in order to start during that time period.
Yeah, those are really great points. One other important thing to note is that not all schools offer all intake periods. Some schools only offer an April and October one, so it's really best to check and make sure that your schools offer your preferred start date before you start your application. And talking about semesters, how long can you study in Japan as a student?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer is you can study for a minimum of 1 year because that's what you'll need to apply for the student visa, all the way up to 2 years, which is the maximum that you can study while on a student visa at a Japanese language school. So it really depends on which school you're starting at and at what time you're starting. Some schools will have schedules that are like 1 year, 3 months, 1 year, 6 months, 1 year, 9 months, all the way up to 2 years. Some schools are more flexible on that than others. You really need to check with the school that you want to study with.
Okay, that brings us to the next question. What is required to enroll in a Japanese language school?
So it really depends on where you're from and what kind of passport you have, and also how old you are and which language school you're studying at. But generally speaking, you'll need to have a few things. The first is you'll need 12 years of formal education. So that means you'll need a high school diploma or you'll need an equivalency like a GED. The other thing is you'll need to be 18 years old by the time that you are admitted to the school. So this means that you're 18 years old and you've also finished your high school or 12 years of formal education by the time you're admitted to the school. So if you are in high school right now and you want to apply and you'll be 18 years old and have graduated high school by the time that you are admitted to the school, that's okay too. You'll also, depending on where you're from and how old you are, need some Japanese proficiency. So if you're above a certain age, you'll have to prove that you've either passed the JLPT N2 or that you've taken 150 hours of classroom instruction in Japanese, or an equivalent 150-hour course. You'll need some sort of certificate saying, I've taken 150 hours of Japanese lessons. In addition to this, you'll have to be physically and mentally healthy. It's a bit weird, you might see that and go, what does that mean? Well, you'll need to make sure that if you're taking any medications or you have any medical conditions, that you communicate with the school and make sure that the medications that you are taking are legal and obtainable in Japan. And so you really have to work with your school on that one. And then in addition to that, you may need to provide some sort of financial documentation showing that you can support yourself while you're studying in Japan. So that means if you have a 2-year course, you would need to show a bank deposit showing that you can support yourself for that time period while you're in Japan.
So we've talked about the minimum age of being 18 years old by the time of admission, but what about if we turn the tables around and ask, is there a maximum age for students who want to study in Japan?
So there's no maximum age limit that's universal to all schools. Each school has its own internal policy in terms of what age they're willing to accept students. In our experience, we've been able to match students above the age of 65 with quality Japanese language schools. But that being said, the older you are, the options will be limited. To answer the question shortly, there's no maximum age limit. It just really depends on the school.
Great. So at this point, if the school said, okay, we're accepting you as a student for our upcoming semester, what process you can expect, and what documents do you need to submit for a student visa?
Yeah, so it really depends on who the person is, how old they are, what kind of country they have a passport from. But generally, you'll have the same basic documents, which are an application form for the certificate of eligibility that will have your basic information like your name, your address, your date of birth, a reason to study, which is kind of like an essay explaining why you want to study Japanese in Japan and what your plans are for it, as well as a signed pledge of financial support from your financial supporter. So that basically is a letter that says, this person, I will take care of them financially during this time period that they're studying Japanese in Japan. And then in addition to that, you'll need a passport style photo of 4 centimeters by 3 centimeters, which is used to add to the visa. You'll need a copy of your passport ID page, and you should also include a scanned copy of any arrival and departure stamps that you have in your passport if you visited Japan in the past. That's very important. You'll also need your latest diploma. So if you've completed high school, you'll need your high school diploma. If you've completed undergraduate diploma. Then from your financial supporter, you'll need bank statements for at least the last 12 months showing that they have at least 2 million Japanese yen in the account. That doesn't have to be in Japanese yen, but it needs to be in a currency equivalent of Japanese yen. So those are the basic things. And then in addition, depending on where you're coming from or how old you are, they may ask you for other things, like we mentioned earlier, JLPT N2 certificate or 150 hours classroom instruction certificate. They might ask for things like more years of bank statements or tax payments, or even a birth certificate proving the relationship between you and your supporter. So it really just depends who's supporting you, how old you are, and which country you're coming from.
Yeah, going back to the COE thing, there's just a lot of what-ifs questions that we've heard from people who really worries about, can my COE get denied? So what do you think about this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Generally, the answer is it's very rare if the school agrees to put your application forward, because the school will have a really good idea of whether or not you have enough documents to pass the immigration checklist and screening, because they submit so many applications on a yearly basis. So generally what will happen is before you apply for the COE, the school will tell you, sorry, you need more documents, or sorry, we can't actually accept your admission. We can't accept you as a student because we know that you won't be accepted for the COE. Aside from that, there's 1 or 2 cases where you could get rejected. That would be if you are applying with like 3 schools at the same time for a COE. Then they would reject you because they said, oh, you're applying for 3 different schools at the same time. If you got caught making fake documents, like fake bank statements for your financial support section, and they somehow figured out that you were faking these documents, you'd be rejected. Or if you had committed a crime or been deported previously from Japan, that could result in the COE being denied. But other than that, generally you would be accepted if the school put forward your application.
That's really reassuring to know. The COE takes 2 to 3 months to process, and once the school gives the certificate to you, you're going to have to pay the tuition. And this is probably the biggest question. How expensive is it to study in a Japanese language school in Japan? And how much can we expect to pay for the first year?
So your total all-in cost to the school for the first year, this doesn't include your living expenses like your rent or your food or your transport. The amount that you'll be paying to the school for the first year will be anywhere from 750 to around 850,000 Japanese yen. That would include around 600 to 700,000 yen of tuition, and then an additional 150 to 250,000 miscellaneous fees like a registration fee, entrance fee, visa application, and other processing fees, support fees, things like that.
Great! So we've covered the basic questions and given the gist of a student visa application with Coto School Finder. And we know there's a lot of information to take in, so we're going to break this podcast into 2. On the next part, we're going to talk about part-time jobs, living expenses, and some final FAQs. Finally, feel free to contact us through our inquiry form found on our website or through the link in the description box below.
Thanks for watching. Please remember to subscribe and turn on notifications.